All right, there we are. Fantastic. So, as I was mentioning for today's class, we are going to practice all the exercises that we've been learning about in the theoretical classes. That is to say, all the types of questions and also the strategy that we have advanced in order to approach the reading section, right? So let me send right now to the WhatsApp group, and this is going to be here also for those students who are not right now in the class, but who are watching this video later. I'm sending to the WhatsApp group a link to a Google document that contains within it, you can open it, by the way, dear Camilla, it is a document that is going to take you to to a Google document that I prepared with 3 different passages, all right? And of course, this is basically an imitation of the exam. And as you can see, when you open the document, I'm going to share my screen so that the rest can see it as well. And there you have here. So as I was mentioning, if you go to the WhatsApp group, you're going to find this. I sent this link to the WhatsApp group. It's a Google document. Open it, and you're going to be taken towards this part. All right. And this is, as I told you, basically a simulation of the exam. All right. You're going to find 3 different reading passages, and every single one of them contains 10 questions, just as it is going to be in the exam. All right. So when you open it, what you're going to do is to read it. All right. You're going to, well, of course, in following the charter strategy, you don't read it, right? Previous responding to the questions or previously, because the only thing you do is when you receive this is you go directly to the first question and you use it in order to respond to questions, right? But anyways, the point is that these are going to be the exercises for today's practice, all right? So if you go down, scroll a little bit, you're going to find that, as I say, there are 3 different passages. The first one is called, let me see, Cindy Sherman passage. The second one is the creators of grammar passage. And the third example is called, let me see, young adult literature. So as I was mentioning, the only thing you have to do in this case is you read the reading passage and you use it in order to respond to questions, right? 10 questions per passage. And at the end of the time we're going to have for reading and exercising our knowledge in this illustration, we are going to give the examples or the responses, okay? I'm going to send the responses in a separate document below this one in the WhatsApp group so that you can later check it out if you're not in this class, okay? So as I was mentioning, let us give us, if you remind for the reading section in the actual exam, you have something like 57 or let's say 1 hour, okay? It's approximately 1 hour in order to read everything and to respond to the 30 questions. But for today's class, in order for us to have some time in order to, of course, review and to apply all the knowledge that we have seen, let us give us 40 minutes in order to read and respond until the point we are able to. And then I'm going to be giving some feedback, okay, with the responses you have taken. In this case, Camila is the only one who is here right now. And according to her responses, we're going to be giving some feedback, all right? So you know more or less what the correct responses are. And later you can compare your responses, of course, with the feedback that we're going to be giving at the end of this class, all right? So I'm going to prepare my chronometer here. And as I mentioned, you're going to have 40 minutes, okay? 40 minutes in order to read and respond until the point you manage to, okay? It's not necessary, as I'm mentioning, to complete everything. And we are going to use the rest of the time in order for us to give some feedback and to analyze the responses and to compare them, all right? So let me prepare here the chronometer, okay? 40 minutes. Oh, not 40 hours, 40 minutes. There you have. Fantastic. Okay. So, dear Camila, do you understand what you have to do right now? You just have to read and to respond to questions until the point you manage to. And then when the time is over, I'm going to be giving you some feedback and we're going to compare our responses and to analyze them. Is that fine? Do you have any question?
No, it's okay. Thank you.
All right. Fantastic. So let us start then with the 40 minutes. All right. And if somebody else joins, well, he's also going to be reading. Okay. So please let us start now. Begin reading. Hi, Lucia. I'm sorry. I went for my notebook in which I had my responses. Um, I'm gonna send you a message, okay, about what you have to do in order not to interrupt Camila. All right?
Okay.
Fantastic. Okay, dear students, I want us to stop here because I want us to have at least 25 minutes of discussion so we can compare our responses, and to the point that you have managed to complete the exercise, because I think that the discussion of the questions is going to be more helpful for you to understand how to apply the concepts that we have been discussing in class. All right, so let's just stop the timer here. Doesn't matter, because as I say, of course, remind that in the actual exam you have 1 hour in order to respond and read these 3 passages and their corresponding 30 questions. Nonetheless, because we are just practicing right now, I think it's more important to discuss these questions in order to check out if we have had some similar responses, right? Because I think that is what we are trying to do here, right? To check out if we have understood how to respond these questions constantly, and we can check that out by comparing our responses, right? So let us do them. Okay, so let us go to the reading passage, and let us go question by question and responding every single one of them and comparing our responses, okay? Let us go then with the first passage, which is called Cindy Sherman passage, all right? Fantastic. So let's go with the first question of this one, and let's see what it says. This is which of the following best expresses the essential information in the highlighted sentence? Can you recognize this type of question? Remember that I told you, right? It's very important to recognize the type of questions we have. Let us open our presentation. And if you remind, this is an example of, where is it? This is an example of this one, of the fifth type of question. Do you remind? It is called essential information question, because basically it is asking you to convey the same information in a given portion of the reading passage, but using different words, right? And this is the type of question. If you remind, what you had to do in order to respond these ones was to find an answer that does not omit any information of the portion, nor that pays too much attention to a single element and misrepresenting the others, all right? It's very important, as I said, that the correct answer is going to express all the main ideas mentioned in that very, very tiny little portion of the reading passage that they give us. And you need to find, as I say, one response that doesn't omit information and that doesn't pay too much attention to a particular topic, and of course, misrepresenting and basically ignoring the rest of the main ideas of that passage or of that reading sentence, right? So now let us see if we have managed to find out the correct answer. In this case, it says, which of the following best expresses the essential information in the highlighted sentence? As a student at the State University of College at Buffalo, New York, Sherman took courses in painting and composition, but did not find the medium satisfying. Incorrect answers, as I say, change the meaning in important ways or leave out essential information. Very important. Okay, so we have here 4 options. The first one is Sherman enrolled in art classes as a college student in the mid-1970s. The second one says Sherman was first trained as a painter, but did not find it completely fulfilling. The third option says Sherman's early painting and composition works were generally unsatisfying. Or 4, Sherman's work in college was unsatisfying and had little influence on her future. For example, the first response, Sherman enrolled in art classes as a college student in the mid-1970s. Let me tell you, this is not a correct answer. And why? Because first of all, it mentions information that has not been textually stated here in our alluded sentence. As you can see here, it is referring to the, let's say, to the year 1970. And although this year was mentioned in the passage, if you read it again, the entire passage, I mean, in our sentence, remember we are right now focused on this particular sentence, not in the entire reading passage. Such a year is not even mentioned. And now also something very important is that the passage, or excuse me, the sentence that we have here, that we have to use and to look for a response that imitates this sentence with its main ideas. This sentence right now is talking about 2 different things: that Sherman was a student of art and painting and composition in a university in the US, and that she didn't find these arts very fulfilling, that she didn't find them satisfying for her art. And now I ask you, is this response giving you that information? No, it's not, because it's omitting, está omitiendo, the part in which the sentence here that we have to, as I say, look for an alternative sentence is talking about how she didn't find this medium satisfying for her art. And this sentence does not talk about that. It simply obviates that part. It's not mentioned. And therefore, as I told you, the correct answer cannot be this one because it's omitting important and main ideas of the sentence that we have in order to look for an alternative one. And as I say, this is not the correct answer. What about the second one? Sherman was first trained as a painter, but did not find it completely fulfilling. Let me tell you, this is the correct answer. Why is this the correct answer? Because it's expressing, as I said, the main ideas of this sentence. Of course, not with the same exact words, not following every single comma and dot in the sentence, but that is fine because, of course, if they were just copying the sentence exactly as it is right now in the question, you would be able to identify it very easily. But is this sentence expressing the same main ideas without leaving out important information? Yes, it is, because it talks about how she was trained as a painter. And that is exactly what the sentence says, that she was trained in a university as a painter, but did not find it completely fulfilling. That is to say, she did not find art or composition or paint, something that satisfied her in her art. Therefore, this is the correct answer because, as I say, it contains the main ideas that the sentence speaks about and doesn't leave out important information. Now, maybe you're saying, but it doesn't mention the name of the university, right? It doesn't. But as I told you, it's not necessary for the correct response to repeat all the information, because if it were doing so, you would be it would be super easy for you to identify it. So as I say, it's not that it contains all the same words, it's that it contains the main ideas and doesn't confuse the information and doesn't leave out important information. What about the third one, for example? The third one, Sherman's early painting and composition works were generally unsatisfying. This is a response that is confusing the information because in our sentence here, it doesn't say that Sherman's work were unsatisfying. No, it says that the medium, that is to say painting and composition, were unsatisfying. But the sentence doesn't say anything about how Cindy Sherman performed in this art. It doesn't say anything about that. If she was good at it, if she was satisfying to her professors, or if she was a good painter, doesn't say anything about that. But this sentence is talking about that. It's the third option is trying to tell us Sherman was very bad at painting because her works were unsatisfying. But this is not what our alluded sentence, in this case highlighted with blue, it's telling us. It's simply telling us that she was a painter and that she did not find painting to be satisfying for her. But this is not what the third sentence expresses. And the same with the fourth option, it says that it had little influence on her future, right? And this is something that, as you can see, the sentence that we have doesn't say. It doesn't say if this was something important for her future as an artist, if it influenced her performance in the future or influenced her decisions. No, it doesn't talk about how influential was this experience for her. It simply talks about she was a painter, she was trained as a painter, and she did not find it very fulfilling. That's it. But it never says anything about the influence of it in her future life. So this is a response that is including information that is not in our alluded sentence, and therefore is incorrect. And as you can see, the only one that remains fulfilling the criteria, that mentions the important points, that doesn't leave out important information, and doesn't pay attention to just one topic, ignoring the others, is the second option. Did you get this one, dear students? Lucia, Camila?
Yes, I did. Yes.
All right.
Me too.
All right, fantastic. There you are. So you're understanding the criteria. Very good. What about the second one? Which of the following can be inferred from paragraph 2 about the time in which Cindy Sherman started to photograph herself as an artistic expression? Now, this is, if you recognize, this is an inference question, right? Because as I told you, the inference questions are very easy to identify because they always have this word inferred from paragraph 2, right? About the time in which Cindy Sherman, etc. This is an inference question. So in this case, let me tell you, trying to advance more rapidly, the correct answer is the answer number 3. In the 1970s, relatively few artists took self-portraits with a camera. And let me tell you why is this the correct answer. This is the correct answer because this has textual basis. This is the only one that has a justification in the reading passage for you to infer this option. And what is that justification? Let me show it to you. It's this one. It says in paragraph 3, right? Let me see. No, paragraph 2. There is a part here where she says this. Let me show it to you. Here, rather than hiring models to serve as the subjects of her pieces, Sherman took, look at it, the revolutionary step of pointing the camera at herself. Now, this word here, revolutionary, means something that people at some point were not doing, but somebody took the first step to do it, right? And in this case, because of this word here, because of this sentence, that the reading passage is suggesting that, hey, what she did was revolutionary, that is to say something that was not common in her time. That is the reason why we can infer that in this case, the third option is correct, that in the 1970s, relatively few artists took self-portraits with a camera, right? This is the only one that we are justified to infer. For example, because the other ones, oil painting as a popular artistic medium was in decline during this time, this is simply incorrect because in the reading passage, the only part in which we listen about oil painting was when Sherman decided to practice this, right? Look at it. It says, where is it? Oh, no, actually, I think it's not even mentioned in the second paragraph, right? Oil is not mentioned, or if it is mentioned, nothing is mentioned about how, let's say, how practiced was this with this medium of art in the 1970s. Nothing at all. So again, we can infer something when we have a justification in the passage. And in this case, oil painting is not even mentioned in paragraph number 2. What about the second option? Many women immediately started to emulate Cindy Sherman's style and methods. This is again false. Why? Because in the second paragraph, nothing it is discussed with regard to the impact of Sherman's work in women at that time. That particular topic is discussed in other paragraphs, but remind that the question is asking us about what? About paragraph number 2. That's the reason why I told you. You need to be very picky when the question tells you. You need to infer something about paragraph 2, then all the information mentioned in other paragraphs, it's simply something irrelevant for you because the question is telling you specifically about paragraph number 2. And in paragraph number 2, there is not a single sentence talking about if her work was influential or not to other artists or photographers in her era. But that is a topic discussed in other paragraphs. I think it's in third or fourth paragraph, but in second paragraph, not at all, and that is incorrect. The same with the fourth option. Cindy Sherman was already very successful and famous in New York. This is actually false, right? Because actually the paragraph says that she was she founded a studio through which to sell her work and began to embark upon a prolific career. But it doesn't say that she was already famous, right, or known. So this is incorrect as well. Did you get this one, dear students?
Yes.
Yes, Camila, did you get this one?
No.
No, all right. No, it's fine. Don't worry. But as I say, this is the criteria. Okay. Think about what the paragraph says. If the paragraph suggests you something, that is the correct answer. But if there is no mention of that in the reading passage, specifically in this case in paragraph 2, you cannot infer it. You must focus on the information they give you in order to infer. Okay. What
I
about
thought it was in number 4.
number 4?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, and probably you chose this one because in other paragraphs it discussed that, right, that she was a very famous and influential artist of her time, and that is true. Nonetheless, in the second paragraph, if you notice, it doesn't say anything about her fame or about her influence in other artists, right? It just talks about what she did and how revolutionary was her art, nothing else, right? But very good. Don't worry, Camila. Let's continue. What about question number 3? According to paragraph 3, Sherman depicted herself as all of the following except, now this is a very tricky question, let me tell you. So you have to be super picky in this one. So this is a factual negative information question, right? If you remind, we discussed this one. It's basically finding the intruder, right? All of these are part of a group except, right, there is one that is an intruder, an intruso in this type of question. Now, the question says, Sherman depicted herself as all of the following except, right? And here we have to find the exception. So, for example, let's go one by one. The first option in this case says a fashion celebrity. And if you go to the paragraph number 3, you find that this is true because the paragraph says specifically, if you look at it here, it says she took photos of herself as a centerfold and fashion icon. So it says textually in this part of the reading passage, it is mentioned that she depicted herself as a fashion icon. So by definition, this is a correct answer because it says she depicted herself as all of the following except a fashion celebrity is fine. This is not the correct answer in this case because we are finding, or we are trying to find the incorrect or excuse me, in this case, we're trying to find the intruder. I don't want to confuse you. We're just trying to find the one that doesn't belong to the group. 3 of these sentences or responses are part of the topics discussed in the reading passage. One of this is not, but the fashion celebrity was discussed in the passage as one of the, let's say, images or models that Sherman tried to depict herself as. And in this case, a fashion celebrity is a particular figure that Sherman used as a mother to depict herself, right? So this is not the answer we're looking for, because she depicted herself as a fashion icon. So this is not the intruder in this case. What about a victim of historical evidence? Now, let me tell you, this is the correct answer, and I'm going to tell you why. If you look at the passage, it says that she depicted herself as, look at it. Where is it? Here, as a figure from history. Now, think about it. It says that she depicted herself in her art and pictures as a figure from history. But it doesn't say anything about if she depicted herself as a victim of violence or historical violence. Notice that. It says a figure from history, but not violence. For example, violence from history could be something, I don't know, like a Jewish who was tortured by Nazis in the Second World War. That could be an example of historical violence. But in this case, it's just a figure from history. That is to say, somebody famous from the historical accounts of events in human history. Nonetheless, look at it. The only time in which the paragraph speaks about violence is in this particular context. It says, in fairy tales and disasters, Sherman made herself look like characters from children's stories, portraying acts of violence that many people consider quite grotesque and shocking. The only time in which Sherman depicted herself as, let's say, as a figure suffering violence was in her exposition about fairy tales and disaster. It wasn't when she depicted herself as a figure from history. So as you can see, this option is confusing the information, because it says a victim of historical evidence. But as I say, she depicted herself not as a victim of historical evidence, of historical violence, but she depicted herself as a historical figure, but not as a victim of historical violence. The only part in the paragraph in which she depicted herself as suffering violence or as a victim of violence was in her exposition about fairy tales, but not in historical expositions. So as you can see, this is the correct answer in this case. This is the answer that you should pick, because this is the intruder in this case. All of the other answers are, let's say, figures or models that she utilized in order to depict herself. She depicted herself as a significant figure from the past, yes, because that is exactly what a figure from history means, right? Somebody who was significant in the past. And also as a magazine model, she depicted herself, because if you look at the paragraph, here she says, Sherman centerfold series of photographs explore modern female beauty by mimicking the style used by famous national magazines like Vogue and Cosmopolitan, excuse me. So as you can see, she depicted herself as a what? As a magazine model, because she imitated very famous fashion magazines as Vogue and Cosmopolitan. So she depicted herself as a magazine model. Nonetheless, the only one that doesn't belong to this group is a victim of historical violence, because, as I say, it confuses information. Now, I recognize this was very, very tricky. Did you manage to find it, Lucia, Camila?
No,
Yes, I did.
I didn't. I
right.
thought it was a 4.
All right, the fourth one. Yes, and yes, it's
I
confusing
also
because
at the beginning thought it was the fourth one. I was between the second one and the fourth one, but I choose randomly. So
okay, all right. Well, but as I say, I mean, in this type of questions, you have to be super, super careful at looking at the details, because, as I say, this is super tricky, right? Because it talks about figure from history, and maybe you say, hey, but well, it makes sense just to express that she suffered violence as a figure from history. But if you look at what the passage says, it doesn't say that. It simply says that she depicted herself as a figure from history, and the violence just came in this part, when she depicted herself as a character from fairy tales, but not as a figure from history, right? So again, look at what the passage says. And in this case, for example, the fourth one is not the correct response here, because it says, right, she mimicked, or well, she was mimicking the style used by famous national magazines like Vogue and Cosmopolitan, right? So basically, it's telling you that she also portrayed herself as a model, right? Because she was mimicking, that is to say, imitating what national magazines do with regard to modern female beauty, like Vogue and Cosmopolitan. So of course, it's telling you that she depicted herself as a model, right? So as I say, tricky question, but nonetheless, try to apply that concept. Just look at what the reading passage says and take only what it says as the criteria for you to choose, okay? Be very careful in this case. Fourth question. The word example in the passage, moreover, in the wake of Sherman's unforgettable use of fantastical imagery and striking compositions to enhance her chosen genre, other artists began to take their own self-portraits, providing innovations of their own, but is still clearly inspired by Cindy Sherman's example, refers to Cindy Sherman's, and here gives you 4 options. Use of self-portraiture, use of striking compositions, use of innovative photographic techniques, or use of fantastical imagery in her work. Now, this is a question, let's say from the category of, what is it? This is a question from the category of, what's this one? Where is this one? No, it's a reference question. Is it? No. I think it's the third one, right? Yes. Yes, the reference question. Because it's asking you about a word that is not a verb, is not a noun, or is not an adjective, but it's asking you, what does this word mean in this particular context, right? And in this case, the word is, as you can see, example, right? Machine determines example. Now, what do you have to do in order to respond to this type of questions? As I told you, what you have to do is to find the reasoning train of the author. What was the last idea the author had on mind when he wrote this word? That is the only thing you have to respond. What was the last idea that the author had on mind when he wrote this word? Example. Now let us see his reasoning train. He wrote, moreover, in the wake of Sherman's unforgettable use of fantastical imagery and striking compositions to enhance her chosen genre. Okay. So in this first idea, the author is discussing a particular period in Sherman's art history when she started to use unforgettable use of imagery and striking compositions. Now, the second idea is that he says that in this particular time, when she started to develop this fantastical imagery and striking compositions, second idea, other artists began to take their own self-portraits. Now, as you can see, there are 2 ideas in this sentence. The first one is that in a particular time of Sherman's art history, she started to use imagery and striking compositions. In that time, okay, second idea, other artists began to take their own self-portraits. That is the second idea. Now, we are going to move on to the third idea. When they started to take their own self-portraits, they also provided innovation, that is the third idea, of their own, but is still clearly inspired by Cindy Sherman's example. Now, I ask you, what was the last idea that he had on mind when he wrote the word example? The last idea that he had on mind was, as I say, the self-portrait, right? Yeah, and that is the reason why in this case, the correct answer is the first one, use of self-portraiture. Because when the author wrote example, the last idea that he had on mind about Sherman's technique or Sherman's, let's say, impact in art wasn't her use of fantastical imagery or striking composition. The second idea talked about her self-portraits. And given that this was the last idea that the author had on mind about Cindy Sherman, her self-portrait movement or technique that she started to popularize among different people, that is what the word example means. Because if you look at the reasoning train, the first idea of the author about Sherman was her use of fantastical imagery and striking compositions. But the second idea was her self-portraits, because he says that other artists began to take their own self-portraits, right? Influenced, of course, by Sherman. So The word example here means providing innovations of their own, but still clearly inspired by Cindy Sherman's example. And we could replace actually the word by Cindy Sherman's self-portrait, right? Because as I say, it was the last idea the author had in mind when he wrote this. And that is the reason why the correct answer is the first one, use of self-portraiture. It cannot be the second one, use of striking compositions, because as I say, this was just the first idea that the author had in mind. But he later moved on to other ideas about Sherman. And the second idea was self-portraiture. It cannot be use of innovative photographic techniques. Why? Because actually, it never talks about innovative photographic techniques of Sherman, right? Excuse me. The only moment in which the author mentions innovative techniques in photographic innovative techniques or something like that is for other artists. It says other artists began to take their own self-portraits, providing innovations, right? So the innovations are practically part of what the other artists, let's say, included and also collaborated with in this movement of self-portrait. But it never talks about Cindy Sherman's innovative photographic techniques or something of that sort. No, the innovations are attributed to the new artists that somehow took part of this movement. But nonetheless, it is never said about Cindy Sherman's photographic techniques or innovations. It is never talked about that. And the fourth is also not correct because it says uses fantastical imagery in her work. Again, this was just the first idea of the author, but it wasn't the last idea he had in mind when he wrote the word example, right? Because the last idea that the author had in mind about Cindy Sherman, remember that the question is asking us about Cindy Sherman. It's not asking us about other artists, but Cindy Sherman. And what was the last idea that the author had in mind about Cindy Sherman? It was her self-portraits. And that is the reason why the correct answer in this case is the use of self-portraiture, because that was the last idea he had in mind about Cindy Sherman. Is this fine? Did you get this one, Lucia, Camila?
Yes, I did.
All right, fantastic. What about you, Lucia?
No, I put that too.
All right. Which one do you choose?
Two.
The second one. All right, it's fine. Remember, because it's a matter of trying to always make that process in your mind. What was the last idea? The author, of course, mentions a lot of ideas when he is writing. That is what we normally do. Of course, when we are writing something, we use a lot of ideas. Nonetheless, remind that in order to find the correct answer for this type of question, what you need to think about is what was the last idea the author had in mind before writing our word, in this case, example. And the last idea the author had in mind about Cindy Sherman in this time was her self-portrait. It wasn't imagery or striking composition, because this was the first idea he had, but not the last one. The last one was self-portraits, right? Fantastic. Very good. We're going to have to stop here because I need to go to other class. Nonetheless, I'm going to send in a few hours a document with all the responses, okay, for this exercise. I am preparing a detailed information about them. But as you can see, here are the responses if you want to compare. Well, the first one is the second option. The second one is the third option. The third one is the second option. The fourth one is the fourth option. The fifth one is the second option. The sixth one is the third option. The seventh one is the third option. The eighth one is the first option. The ninth one is option D. And the 10th question is 3, 1, and 2. So I'm going to send a detailed review of all the questions in order for you to compare your responses and to learn from that. But please give me a bit of time because I need to complete the document, because the one that I had for some reason has been lost. So I have to remake it. All right. Is that fine, Lucia? Camila, you have any question?
No, it's okay. Thank you.
All right. Fantastic. Lucia, any question?
No, it's clear. Thank you.
All right. Fantastic. So I'm going to send that document. Please wait for it. And please, if you have more time right now, go and complete this. Read the second paragraph, the second passage, read the third passage, and try to respond. To respond to the questions. Take a paper, write down your responses, and then when I send the review document with the review responses, you can compare and to analyze the criteria that you have been following in order to see if it matches the one that you always need to have in order to respond correctly to the questions. All right? Fantastic. So I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to take your assistance, okay? Thank you very much for joining me. I know that it's something that it was not planned because this is not the normal time for you to be part, but thank you very much for joining me. It's been a pleasure to discuss this with you. Please, dear students, help me with the traditional poll that we always fill, all right? We always have to fill it even today. You know that you help me a lot with that. And now I'm gonna take your assistance, okay? But actually, everybody's gonna have the assistance, but let's say for you, you're gonna have extra points. All right. Where is it? Where is it? Okay, so 059. So the first person is Reyes Camila, right?
Yes, present.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Camila, for having me here. And finally, the second student is Lucia, right? Lucia Manrique.
Yes, present.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Lucia. Well, as I say, you're gonna have some extra points, okay? If you need something, you're gonna have those extra points for being here. So thank you very much, okay, dear students. It's been a pleasure to discuss this with you. I'm gonna see you next week. I'm gonna send a document, please wait for it. And if you have any question, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me through the WhatsApp group or through my personal chat, all right? Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you very much for having joined me.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you very much. See you later. Thank you.